He didn't have a clue what was gonna happen. And you should be safe in your own castle, and he wasn't.
A brutal killing.
He was a great father and a good husband.
This was premeditated, it was planned.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
He didn't want us to know that they were sleeping together.
I think he was Mr. Gigolo.
He was a career criminal. He's been known to shoot people before.
The truth will be revealed.
He finally said, look, I'm not killing nobody, but I'll hook you up with a guy who will.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. It's a searing summer day in Addis, Louisiana.
Addis is a growing community. It started off as a very small little town, but has grown. A lot of people that are moving in there with children.
But residents of this usually quiet town are in for a horrific shock.
West Baton Rouge 911.
Oh my God, help me. My husband is in the bed, there's blood coming out of his ears. Somebody's been in my house, I just walked in the door. Oh my God, I got here,
First responders arrived on scene and cleared the home to make sure no suspects were still present.
Close behind are Detective William J. Starnes and investigator Richie Johnson.
As we made our way to the bedroom, that's when we made our first contact with Monique Kits. Monique was screaming, and we tried to talk to her, but she was not very audible when she answered us back.
In the bed is Monique's husband, Cory Kits.
We could tell something major happened because of the blood.
Cory was shot 3 times. And one of the shots severed his spinal cord.
There was blood on the comforter. There was blood all along the side of the bed, down onto the ground. A large portion of that blood had just slowly leaked out of Cory's body.
He was found laying on his back in the bed as if he had been shot while he was asleep, with the appearance of no struggle whatsoever.
Cory's wife, Monique, along with their daughter Dory and son Cory Kits Jr., are removed from the scene.
Cory Kits Jr., he was traumatized where he just didn't even acknowledge anything. Dory, I think she was kind of fighting with the thought of, is he dead or is this something that's not really happening? Monique, she was constantly babbling. Something tragic happened to her, and she's very distraught over it. We interviewed her. She said, I didn't really have any enemies.
By all accounts, Cory Kits was a likable guy. The neighbors liked him, his family liked him, his in-laws liked him. He was a great father, good worker, good provider.
The people that he dealt with, they said if he needed money and he had it, he would give it to you. Everybody loved him. He would literally give you the shirt off his back to help you out.
It was just strange. We don't commonly see someone killed in their home in their sleep. That's just not normal for our area.
They examine the house, looking for clues as to the identity of the killer.
The door was unlocked when officers arrived. So there was no way that someone forced their way into the home to commit this homicide. That we knew for sure.
It didn't look like a burglary. Normally, you'd find drawers open, you'd find things tossed around. Laptops, computers, the whole house would have been in a disarray, and there'd have been a lot of stuff stolen. Basically, everything was still in the house.
There was some broken glass. It was a vase that was knocked over. I believe the things that were broken was as the intruder was exiting in a hurry.
So no forced entry, the closeness of the gunshot. Those are all really personal things.
If it had been a violent struggle with blunt force injury, the list of suspects would be narrowed because of the difference in build and strength. But that this is a murder committed by handgun means that anybody is capable of having committed this crime.
There's something here. There's more to it.
You had this guy who was this upstanding guy, everybody liked him, but he's dead. And we need to figure out why.
To solve the case, investigators must unravel Cory Kits' last 24 hours.
The significance of the 24-hour timeline, those last movements of your victim are often critical to what happened. They become instrumental in every homicide case to going backwards from there to investigate who, where, when, and why.
We knew that Cory Kits had been working that evening. He worked the night shift.
He came home from work from the plant that morning, early 5-ish, 5:15 in the morning. No rigor mortis had set in. So his time of death was sometime between 6 in the morning and noon that day. We felt that it had to be someone who knew his schedule.
And that's where you really start looking around, especially at family, friends.
Whenever there's a domestic homicide, whether that be a husband, a wife, you start with the partner first.
You don't call Monique a suspect just because she lived in the house, but you have to include her or exclude her.
They question Monique about her movements that day.
Monique accompanied Cory's sister, Clonice, for a walk at the track at like 6 in the morning.
And Clonice Stewart informed us that she had walked with Monique Kits that morning.
After her walk, Monique came home, talked with Cory for a few minutes, took a shower, got dressed. He was still watching television at the time when she left.
Then she said she went to her daycare down in Plaquemine.
And when we looked at the neighborhood video, you see the vehicle going out toward the highway, and turning in the direction of Plaquemine.
She had worked her normal business morning hours. We confirmed with video that she did go to a local laundromat and was just coming home with the 2 kids for lunch on Friday.
That's when she walked in and found her husband dead. So it appeared that she had a solid alibi.
Monique then tells police that when she left the home, her daughter Dory was still there.
When we asked Dory about the time she left to go to work, she said it was around 8:40. She got up, she got dressed. Daddy's door was closed, and that when she left, she went straight on to work at the daycare in Plaquemine. And nothing appeared out of the unusual. She didn't see anything or anyone.
But when asked about the discovery of her father's body, things become muddled.
Some of the answers she gave didn't add up to the ones that Monique would give. And this included about the door. When they got there, her statement was she went to the door and opened it. And when you look at Monique's account, it was she opened the door and that the other 2 followed. So we had kind of a different scenarios given.
When you have someone who can't remember the details, it can be challenging for investigators in determining whether this individual is telling the truth and they really don't remember, or if they're trying to hide something. I think it takes experienced detective work to discern the 2.
We tried to polygraph Dory, but she refused. She wasn't very cooperative. That heightened my suspicions because if you don't have anything to hide, it's pretty indicative of some type of knowledge or guilt.
Detectives scour the neighborhood surveillance video, looking to prove or disprove Dory's account.
It did show her leaving the residence at about the time she said she had left.
But there was another person in the vehicle with Dory.
Detectives questioned Cory Kits about the mystery man she was with on the morning of her father's murder.
We were able to determine it was Marlon, which was her boyfriend.
Once the police find out that the boyfriend was in the house the day of the murder, he's automatically a suspect. You're going to have to convince the police that you did not do it, because you are immediately a person who has the opportunity to kill him.
When asked to explain herself, she changes her story.
The night before, Marlon had supposed to have gone home. But Dory actually told us that Marlon had spent the night with her.
Why would you lie about having your boyfriend at your house? You might lie to your parents, but why would you lie to the cops? So that was the first indication to me that, maybe we got the suspects right here.
She said Cory did not like Marlon being upstairs in the house when he didn't know he was there.
Cory had made the statement, if he ever caught the person being with his daughter in not the proper manner, that he would do something.
But Dory is adamant that the two of them left the house that morning without incident.
She said she came down the stairs. She kept Marlon to stay up there in case her daddy was awake. And if that door was open, she didn't want him seeing Marlon there, because then there would have been trouble. According to her, the door was closed. She motioned for Marlon to come down and got in the car, left, and she took him to his job and then continued on to her job.
The only way to confirm this is to speak to Marlon.
I think there's a certain tension always between a father and the boyfriend of the daughter, that there is a lack of trust. If they don't like each other, that dislike can lead to hate in some circumstances, and that could lead to one of them wanting the other one dead.
Marlon had told me that he was at home the morning of the murder, that he had an uncle who drove him to his workplace. He told me, he said, I went there, I worked, I didn't see Dory until we heard about the homicide.
Marlon's denial directly contradicts Dory's version of events.
So that kind of raised suspicions about him.
But we're being careful, of course, at the time that we're talking to him, because he's a suspect. Is he feeding us bullshit?
They convince Marlon to do a polygraph.
There's a reason why polygraph is used in my experience. It is to send messages to the person that you're having interviewed. You don't believe them. Why would you ask me to take a polygraph otherwise?
They would ask him questions like, did you murder Cory Kits?
Under pressure, Marlon comes clean.
Marlon just basically admitted he spent the night there, but he didn't know anything about the death.
And he passed it, a perfect polygraph where he he was telling the truth.
And a lot of things he probably bumbled off to us were because he was scared.
They didn't want us to know that they were sleeping together. Dory wanted to keep that out of the picture. And that one little lie got both of them to be looked at. She loved her daddy.
Dory then provides detectives with a new lead.
She said, I do know my father had spoke about a red car that was parked across the street a while back that he had never seen before. When he approached, it left and went on out of the subdivision. And that he felt that was something strange about that, and he was warning us to be careful. It was the month prior to the murder.
Police must determine if anyone saw the red car return the day Cory was killed.
Canvases are done almost in radiuses. So you take a short distance around your crime scene. You canvass within that area. Very, very important, because people do see things. You have to find a way to use their information.
A neighbor was found who lived directly across the street. He did see a vehicle in the driveway that morning of the homicide between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. But it appeared to be a silver SUV, not a red car. He said, I was in and out of the house, loading up my vehicle, getting ready to go to work. He said, by the time I did leave, the car was gone. He said, so never paid much more mind to it. It got my vehicle and left for work.
There should have been no vehicle parked in the driveway that morning that didn't belong to a Kits family member. I mean, everyone's away at work, and Mr. Kits is in his bed sleeping. No one should have been in the driveway.
We believe whoever was in that vehicle had likely committed the murder.
Police now have a description of a vehicle seen during the window Cory Kits was killed.
We had this gentleman talking about a silver SUV.
So people are filling in the gap. Why was the car there? Knowing the behavior of the victim, especially any patterns, becomes very helpful.
To determine if Cory was expecting someone at the house that morning, they pull his phone records.
We were looking for any contacts, numerous contacts that he might have had with somebody. We also had a dump done on the phone to see who he might have been texting, pictures that might have given us a clue on what occurred. We found some text messages that were quite revealing.
The messages suggest Cory was involved in several affairs.
Oh, we learned that Cory had a pretty extensive extracurricular love life, so he was a man about town, for lack of a better term. It's something you need to look at. It's outside the norm of someone's lifestyle to have these affairs, especially long-term, multiple affairs.
Jealousy is a legitimate motive for murder that clouds the thinking of the individuals involved. Let's say it's just easy to kill someone, get them out of the way so we can carry on our relationship. It's a crime of passion. If you can show me a love triangle, I'll tell you have a potential homicide on your hands.
On closer inspection, one number appears significantly more often than the others.
This might be a lead for us. And we started subpoenaing records on this number.
They trace it to a woman named Lucy Williams.
We end up calling this young lady in, and it basically started off questioning about what was your relationship to Cory Kits. How did you know him? She finally ends up telling us that they did have an affair, that they were close. They were seeing each other on numerous occasions. She could have found out about one of the other mistresses. Could have probably gotten mad.
Detectives attempt to link Lucy to the car spotted in his driveway at the time of the murder.
Her vehicle was certainly background checked, but it didn't fit the silver SUV.
We never had her around that area around the time of the murder. And we found no motive from her whatsoever. This woman loved him. You could tell in her emotions, she really loved him. She got to a point where she knew that it was never going to be, so they end up becoming what you would consider the best of friends. It hurt her when she found out that he was murdered. She had nothing to do with it. So that was another door closed.
But the discovery of infidelity turns attention back to Cory's wife, Monique.
Wife finding out that her husband was doing something that actually just drove her to the point where she couldn't take it no more. That would be reason for murder.
Detectives must determine if she's more than just a grieving widow.
Investigating families are difficult. You have to ask a lot of questions, and you have to realize at the same time you're dealing with the victims, potentially. And one of them could be the killer.
She came in and said, look, you know, I want to make a complaint. I want somebody to take this case over. I can't believe they don't have a suspect. They don't have someone in jail. And you're not solving the crime quick enough. She said something about Dory's boyfriend, taking a polygraph. And I said, well, that's interesting because I have one in another room. That's one of the other things I do. Will you take one?
She said, I got to talk to an attorney about that. She didn't want to take it, and that kind of puts up the red flags. Normally, if you're innocent, you're going to say, oh, yeah, I want to prove my innocence here.
But she refused to do it. And that spoke volumes to me.
They look deeper into the dynamics of Cory and Monique's relationship.
She didn't pay the bills. It was always Cory that had to catch the bills. Any of the school's bills, he had to get in there and do it himself. She was more of a spender.
She's broke. Living the dream on the outside, and there's no money.
They discover something even more inflammatory.
Cory Kits did in fact have a death policy. Monique Kits was a beneficiary of that policy. We also learned that the death policy would be paid even in the event he was murdered.
We spoke with the insurance company out of New York. They had claimed that 5 days after Cory Kits' homicide, that a Monique Kits was calling, trying to get the claim on that. Best way I could describe it, you saw the smoke, and you knew there was a fire, and that sooner or later, the flames were gonna break.
Police now believe Monique Kits has motive for killing her husband, Cory.
I absolutely believe that she was involved. But she had an alibi that we couldn't ignore. You could probably exclude her as the person who did the actual killing, but not as being involved, because she could have hired someone.
It's an outlandish theory, but would explain Monique's potential involvement.
Monique Kits' cell phone records were subpoenaed. It enabled us to track her movements the day of the murder, as well as her correspondence before and after.
They focus their attention on who she was speaking to during that time.
The police can determine down to 5 or 6 yards of where you were at any given time by tracing your cell phone. So if you're an innocent person, all you got to do is hand over your cell phone, and most of the time, you'll be cleared of that charge. If you're a guilty person and the police seize your cell phone, they can put you at a location at a specific time.
When investigators were able to pull all the phone records together, some of the conversations were between her and a man called David Johnson. And there was thousands and thousands of contacts between them. It was such an astronomical number that even the investigators were like, this is crazy. We've never seen this many contacts between people. David Johnson was the milkman for her child care business in Plaquemine.
We learned they began seeing each other and having an affair.
Monique Kits' cell phone records indicated there was, in fact, communication between the milkman and Monique on the morning of the murder.
Detectives tracked David Johnson down.
He wasn't too good of a character, and we knew that we were gonna get lies from him. He tried to distance himself from Monique. And I asked, why were you constantly calling her? He said, because basically I'm a friend of hers, and I just checking to see how she's doing.
We also asked, do you know who did, or did you see who killed, or did you in any way participate in the death of Cory Kits? He said, I didn't kill him. I don't know what the hell's going on here.
He provides police with an alibi.
David was on his milk delivery route, and we were able to confirm through his cell phone that he was actually on those routes during the time of the murder. So he was excluded as a shooter. But in the phone analysis, there was some three-way communications between David Johnson, Monique, and another person, Carl Howard.
Some of those three-way calls also came on the morning of Cory's murder.
David Johnson was friends with Carl Howard from some years back, and he introduced Monique and Carl. So we sent detectives up to Atlanta, Georgia, where Carl Howard was now living, to do an interview. And one of the things that they observed was that he had a red vehicle. They remembered a red car reported by Cory outside of his home before the murder.
Detectives question Carl on his whereabouts the day Cory is actually killed.
During the interview with Carl, he told detectives that he was in Baton Rouge with his sister-in-law, and he was attending a birthday party for his niece.
Police turned to his sister-in-law to verify his story.
She says, I do not lie for anyone. She said, no, he was not with me. So that kind of blew that little scenario out of the water.
We tracked Carl Howard's cell phone records. They showed that he was, in fact, in Addis, Louisiana, on the day that Cory Kits alleged to have seen a suspicious red car out front of his house. They also showed that he was in the area the day of the murder, almost to the minute, except for about a 20-minute, 30-minute gap where there's no communication.
This gap of time where his phone is turned off is directly within the time frame of Cory's murder.
So now you have this triangle of Carl Howard and David Johnson and Monique. You have these time frames of telephone conversations and communications can't be explained away.
As they continue to dig into the cell phone records, they make a disturbing connection. Calls made from Howard's phone to that of a violent criminal.
Cory Knox was that number that just showed up out of nowhere and was constantly contacting Carl Howard. Cory Knox was your average career criminal. He's been known to shoot people before.
He ran with local gangster and had a pretty extensive record himself.
With an alleged history of gun violence, police must determine how Knox fits into this crime.
His mother had a vehicle that matched the vehicle that was seen that morning. It was a silver SUV.
And it was just like, oh God, we got a piece of the puzzle in.
At that point, we couldn't say he was a shooter, but he was involved. So now we think we have all the proper puzzle parts, and now we need to put those pieces together.
Police believe they have identified the conspirators behind the death of Cory Kits, but one key detail remains a mystery.
Basically, we had the roadmap. We had the players, and we had the phone records. We still couldn't tell you who the trigger man was.
In custody, Monique Kits, Carl Howard, and Cory Knox refused to cooperate. So police turned back to the milkman, David Johnson.
We told him he was going to probably face charges if he didn't get on board with us and start telling the truth. And he started giving us the more details of what went on.
He outlined the entire deal from day one. He was able to tell us that Monique had confronted him about killing her husband several years back. And he said, look, I played along. Yeah, I took $1,000 from her as a down payment. She kept on and kept on. And he finally said, look, I'm not killing nobody, but I'll hook you up with a guy who will. He mentioned it to Carl Howard, and Carl ended up hooking up separately with Monique, and they hatched this plan to kill her husband. He said there was a down payment of $4,000. And that Carl Howard had made an attempt on an earlier date, and that attempt was foiled. But he said she was hell-bent to have her husband killed.
Using David's testimony, police are now able to construct the timeline of what happened when Carl Howard returned for a second attempt at Cory Kits' life.
So the morning of the murder, Carl Howard told Cory Knox that his vehicle wasn't running right and he needed a ride over to Addis. Mr. Knox then took his mother's silver SUV and drove up to the Kits home.
Cory came home after a long night's work and went to bed.
When Dory and Marlon was leaving, Carl Howard and Cory Knox were in the vicinity. They were quite aware of the car that Dory drove, and not to do anything until they were sure that particular vehicle was no longer at the scene.
They parked in the driveway, which coincides with what the neighbor said he saw.
Carl Howard went up to the house, went in, and shot Cory Kits in the head.
He came back out, got in the car, and they drove off.
Then Monique completed her scenario by having her children with her and putting on an act, crying, being distraught.
That is just about as diabolical as you can get. To bring your kids home, knowing that your husband would be found dead and your kids would see that. Now that's cold.
It speaks volumes about her and her wickedness, as the only way I can say it. There are some very evil people in this world.
I think the motive in the end with Monique was money. It was greed. It was about money. You should be safe in your own castle. And he wasn't because of Monique.
In March 2013, the three conspirators finally faced charges.
Cory Knox pled guilty to accessory after the fact of those crimes, got a 5-year sentence.
Carl Howard, who did the shooting, and Monique Kits, they were both charged with conspiracy to commit murder and second-degree murder. Both were found guilty and both received life without parole.
They remain eligible for appeal.
David, for his testimony, he wasn't charged. It was like a big weight lifted off your shoulder. I think the thing that really got to me was the family, Cory Kits' mother, father, his sisters, all the family that was there. We were standing by them. It's hard to put into words when you could see in their eyes and their expressions that justice had come. I'll never forget, his mother, she said, "You told me you weren't going to quit," and she said, "I knew you weren't." When you have someone tell you something like that, it got to you. It was a dark cloud lifted off of them.
I had no clue what to do. I just knew something was wrong.
A brutal killing.
It was by far the worst day of my life.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
He was a little cocky, arrogant, hard to talk to.
About anything that comes out of his mouth should start with "once upon a time."
We discovered there's a serial murderer working northern Indiana.
We got to the point where we were pretty much just losing hope.
The truth will be revealed.
He said, "I'll kill you like I did Teresa."
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. Mishawaka, Indiana, a peaceful town a few hours north of Indianapolis.
It was a quiet community, not much going on. There's a nice river that runs through the city.
Homicides are extremely low. We may get 1 or 2 a year in Mishawaka.
I need an ambulance right away. What's the problem? I can have my sister's passed out. I put her over, her face is crushed on the ground. You still breathing? No. All right, I'll send somebody right out.
On arrival, first responders find 16-year-old Teresa Burns already dead. Detective Craig Whitfield is given responsibility for finding her killer.
When I arrived there, the neighbors were all standing out gawking because nothing ever happened in Mishawaka. Walking into the home, I saw straight ahead, there was a doorway into the kitchen. There's a stairway coming down from the upper level. And the victim's lying on the floor, face down, blood all over her face. And she'd been shot to death. It was a horrible thing to see.
Teresa was a smart person. She had ambitions of being a teacher. She was this cute little girl that blossomed when she became 16. My relationship with my sister was very good. She was very loving and caring. Worst day of my life. By far the worst day of my life.
To solve her murder, detectives must work backwards, reconstructing the final hours of Teresa's young life, starting with the moment her body is discovered.
Steve Burns showed up at the house at 5:15.
As I walk up to the door, I hear the phone ringing, and it's my brother, Tony. He was about second grade at the time.
His little brother Tony wanted to know if he could come home, and Steve said, "Sure, come on home." And so then he hung up the phone.
I look down and see my sister lying right next to me on the floor. I don't know if there's some kind of prank, so I kind of nudged my sister. Say, "Teresa, right? Joke's over, get on up." She didn't move. So I knelt down, and as I started to roll her over, I had noticed a large puddle of blood that kind of bubbled up off of her.
Then he realized that this wasn't a joke at all and that she was dead. And then he called the police.
A few minutes after that, my mom pulls up. And I was not about to have a policeman that did not know my mom have to tell my mom that my sister was dead. And my mom just screamed and cried out and kind of fell down to the ground a little bit. And from there, things started to slowly just become more of a blur.
Teresa Burns was a typical 16-year-old girl in high school, dating boys and doing what 16-year-olds do. Nothing to indicate that she was some kind of wild child. Everybody who said she was a very good friend, or just a good girl.
I learned from Teresa's mom that she had received a phone call from the school about 10 o'clock that day, and that Teresa needed to go home to change clothes. So Teresa caught the city bus at about, I think, 10:15 and arrived home around 10:30 a.m.
And then at around 5 o'clock, Steve came home and found her. There was a couple-hour window there when she was murdered.
But there was some blood dried on her face, so it was pretty evident that it had taken place maybe a little while back.
Detective Whitfield examines the scene, searching for clues about the killer.
We checked the entire perimeter of the home. There were no pry marks, no forced entry. The person was either allowed into the home or the door was left unlocked and they walked into the home. Teresa was semi-nude. Her bra was pushed up. Her pants had been torn off and thrown into the kitchen. Her panties were down around her ankles. Just by surveying the scene, it would appear maybe it was some sort of sex crime that had gone awry. Was that part of the crime interrupted somehow, or did the person change their mind? We didn't know. What we did find was an ejector rod from a small handgun, which had fallen off while the weapon was being fired. I'd never seen a weapon lose an ejector rod like that.
An ejector rod on a revolver would be the rod that sticks in through the cylinder, making sure that the cylinder doesn't open up. You can kind of tell what type of firearm it could be because not too many firearms have ejector rods. When you have something that's left on the scene, then that tells me that they either wanted to get out of there in a hurry, or it could be just that it's an aftersight.
It was just a clue that I kept very quiet. I didn't release it to the media. I figured that, you know, if somebody knew they lost a piece of evidence from their gun at the crime scene, they may ditch the weapon somewhere. The bullets were removed from Teresa's body in an effort to determine what type of weapon was used based on what we knew at that time. We believe Teresa was shot with an RG-10 handgun.
This type of gun was a cheap gun, not a well-made weapon.
It shoots a very small caliber, the .22 short.
The fact that she had been shot 4 times in the face, we felt was significant. If it would have been a stranger, one shot to the head would have been enough. But this was overkill, this was personal. And so it led me to believe that the killer knew her well. In all cases, we always start within and then work our way out. You don't want to put the blinders on and give somebody a pass because of who they are, how they're related to the victim. Her brother, Steve Burns, found her dead on the floor. He was somebody that we needed to check out.
The numbers of domestic homicides is much higher than stranger-on-stranger homicides. The fact that you're related, in most cases, means that you're a suspect. And so the police will look at family members to see who has an axe to grind with other family members.
One of the things that Steve had done that afternoon kind of gave us pause. Walking in the front door, straight ahead, her body's lying on the floor. And you'd have to step past Teresa's body to answer the phone in the kitchen. It was one of those things that there was a lot of debate within the department on whether or not Steve could be somehow involved in the case. What exactly is going on?
Within hours of her brutal murder, detectives have turned their attention to Teresa Burns's brother, Stephen.
I'm 18 years old. To know that I was a suspect really put a fear in me. What reason would they have to suspect me? I didn't understand it.
So we did do a polygraph with Steve.
It was during the polygraph test is when things really got scary.
And they would ask me, do you know anything about your sister's death? Were you present when your sister died? Are you responsible for your sister's murder?
I was terrified. They were asking me, did I get into an argument with my sister? Was asking if I threatened my sister, all stuff to try and get me to say something that wasn't true. I didn't have anything else to give them but what I knew. And I emphatically said, no, I did not kill my sister, Teresa. So he leans over and he tells me that I failed the test. The polygraph says that you're lying. Okay, so I really am a suspect now.
Believing Teresa was killed some hours before Stephen made the 911 call, they question his whereabouts for earlier in the day.
Steve told me when I interviewed him that he was at work at Burns Rental, family business. And he took lunch at about noon with his girlfriend at the time. They went to the park. Then he went back to work. And then when he left work, he went directly home and found his sister dead on the floor. I called Steve's girlfriend, and then she told me the same story that Steve had told me, that they had gone to the park to eat lunch.
Also, at the fast food place, there was my best friend's mom worked there at the time. And so I would see her every day. So I had another alibi of someone there to say, yes, I was there at this place at this point in time.
So he had done exactly what he told me he had done. This polygraph came across that he flunked, but he went through a lot of trauma with his sister being murdered. And I can just imagine his response in the polygraph being associated with the trauma that he had gone through. So I felt pretty comfortable that Steve was not involved in this in any way.
It was always still there. Even though I knew I didn't do it, my family knew I didn't do it. I never was really angry at anybody. The only person I was angry at was the person that did this.
Vindicated, Stephen points them to a new person of interest.
Teresa had a steady boyfriend. His name was Sean.
I don't think Steve really liked Sean all that much. I think he was a little bit protective of his younger sister.
I'm big brother, so I gotta stick up, you know. You don't want to hang around him. You want the best for your sister.
And apparently Teresa and Sean had had a quarrel, but that was just a few days before the murder.
It's not the first time that, you know, her and her boyfriend have had a problem.
I think Steve didn't know what it was about, but he was using, you know, harsh words toward Steve's sister. And he said some things to Teresa, and Steve Burns said, "Don't you talk to my sister that way." We had to interview him in depth.
Crimes of passion are normally emotionally driven. Is it conceivable and possible that the boyfriend might have been involved? You have to look at it. Did the fight that occurred turn things sour? It's a viable motive for murder.
We learned Sean was suspended from school. And he was home with his mom that day. And he says when Teresa came home, she called him at about 11 o'clock, talked to him for, I think, maybe a half hour or so. His mom verified that he was there, but then he had gone to the mall later on. It did occur to us that, he knew Teresa was home that day. And sure, he could have gone to the house. We talked to his friends, and they verified he'd gone to the mall. All his friends said, no, he wasn't really acting weird or anything, and he was crushed when he found out that Teresa had been murdered. His reaction seemed to be genuine. We felt pretty comfortable that he wasn't involved in this case.
Sean reveals a critical new detail about Teresa's last day.
He said that there was a person at the door ringing the doorbell while they were on the phone. He felt like that was very important for us to know.
When the doorbell rang, he had told Teresa to be careful.
She went to check the door and came back to the phone and told him that, look, they needed to use the phone. And he told Teresa, don't let him in. So Teresa and Sean continued talking for a few more minutes, and it was time for Teresa to hang up and get back to school. And just as they were getting ready to hang up from their call, Sean said he heard the doorbell ring again. That was the last time that anybody spoke to Teresa Burns. And he was right, that was very important. But we had to then verify his story.
While checking this lead, Detective Whitfield receives another tip.
I got a phone call from a detective in Florida, actually a friend of mine. He said, hey, you might want to take a look at this guy down here. His name is Michael Lockhart. He murdered a girl up in Lake Station, Indiana, and now he's down here. Maybe he might be involved in that Teresa Burns case. What was most intriguing about Michael Lockhart's case in northern Indiana was that Wendy Gallagher was a 16-year-old girl. She was murdered in her own home. They both appeared to have a sexual motivation to them. They were within close proximity. They're within an hour and a half of each other down the Indiana toll road. I mean, you could get to one place to another pretty quickly. As I started digging in, I found out that Michael Lockhart was a serial murderer.
Detectives learn serial killer Michael Lockhart has been linked to another Indiana murder just 3 months before Teresa Burns was killed.
If an investigator suspects that the killer is a serial killer, they would look at the victimology, if the victims were of a certain type, certain appearance, certain gender, things along those lines.
It kind of matched up with what I was looking at with Teresa's case, at least in general terms. Wendy Gallagher had been stabbed to death, which is a little bit different MO than Teresa's case.
After killing Wendy Gallagher, Lockhart went on a cross-country crime spree, which included armed robbery, rape, and the murder of another teenage girl.
So we run the NCIC nationwide criminal history search on him, check into his whereabouts, track his timeline, see where he was on January 11th, 1988. And it turns out that on the day of Teresa's death, he was in South Florida committing a crime there. So at that point, it made it pretty easy to eliminate him as a suspect.
With Lockhart in custody and his time accounted for, police are forced to move on.
Any murder investigation is a fluid process. So you're talking to a lot of people. You're trying to figure out what makes sense, what doesn't. Who else could there be? Who else can I interview? So you just look for more people to talk to, because you never know where that lead's going to come from.
They return their focus to the search for Teresa's mystery visitor.
We canvassed the whole neighborhood around Teresa's house. We were able to locate a neighbor that saw a young man on the day of her murder.
She did see somebody go up to the front door, so that's obviously going to pique your interest.
The neighbor reported seeing a guy going into Teresa's home at about 11 o'clock, which was about the same time that Teresa's boyfriend, Sean, said the doorbell was ringing. If it were been a stranger, she probably wouldn't have let him in the home. So that means she knew the person. We were able to get a general description for a sketch artist. She described him as just a medium build, dark hair, late teens, early 20s.
The picture looked like nobody that we knew. We had no clue. Not one of us in the family knew who he was.
We released a sketch for all the public to see, but this picture was so generic, it could look like everybody or nobody, and that's very frustrating. This was one of those cases where the media was very interested in it. The young 16-year-old girl, high school girl, was found murdered in her own home. Mishawaka then was pretty innocent. So the fact that everyone wants to see some resolution of this, yeah, there's some pressure that goes along with that. I had an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old daughter, and I'm thinking, how would I feel if this happened to my daughters? So you want to do everything you can to find out who did this and bring them to justice.
1 month after the murder, Detective Whitfield gets a new lead.
I got notified that an RG weapon had been turned in to the Mishawaka Police Department. The gentleman that turned it in, his name was Les Snyder. Hey, look, I found this gun. Just want to turn it in. But when I looked at this weapon, it's missing the ejector rod. I'm thinking, okay, this is the gun. The guy said he found it in the bushes down the road from his house. I took the weapon out and looked at it, and I discovered that it didn't have any rust on it.
When we receive firearms that are left out in the elements, that'll corrode or even rust a firearm. It wasn't outside. It was somewhere else.
And so, yeah, this is a moment where you start thinking, okay, we're onto something here. We felt that the gun was a key piece of the evidence, so we sent that to the FBI lab for testing. As I started digging into Mr. Snyder's background, it turns out that he has a stepson, Phil Jeans, who at that time was 17 years old. We knew that the suspect that walked into Teresa's home that day was late teens, early 20s. Phil Jeans did have a juvenile record, some drugs, and I think a burglary charge.
He was known to be a fighter. He caused a lot of havoc with people, kind of a bully.
Detective Whitfield brings Les Snyder in for questioning.
He said that his wife told him to get this gun out of the house because she had found it underneath Phil's mattress in his bedroom. The fact that Les Snyder didn't tell us the whole story early on when he turned the gun in I felt was significant because it meant to me that maybe he suspected that this gun had been used and he just didn't want to be any part of that.
They look for a connection between Phil Jeans and Teresa.
I talked to a lot of 16-year-old kids, high school kids, and a lot of them, they were apprehensive, but I found out that Phil was dating Teresa Burns' best friend.
This was kind of shocking. We had no clue that Teresa's friend had dated Phil at that time.
Teresa's relationship with Jeans, I think, was my girlfriend is dating him, so therefore, you know, we're hanging out. I never got the indications from anybody that they were friends.
But I was able to determine that Phil had been to Teresa's house before. So he knew where she lived. As far as knowing what a motive might be for Phil to use this gun on Teresa, it wasn't really clear for us. But now we have a weapon that we believe was used in the murder. I have a name of a person, Phil Jeans, who had the weapon. Now I needed to find out if Phil Jeans was on Teresa Burns' timeline. So the first time I talked to Phil, he came in with his parents. He was a little cocky, arrogant. He said when Teresa was murdered, he was living in Fort Wayne, Indiana. That's about 90 miles or so from Mishawaka. He said he was working at a restaurant job there and lived there with his brother. So if that would be true, he couldn't have been involved in Teresa's case. But I contacted the HR department at this company and found out that he had quit that job a week before the murder. I ended up talking to his brother, and he goes, Phil left, Fort Wayne, and he came back to Mishawaka.
The story that he originally told was a lie.
As they push Jeans for the truth, he implicates another teen, James Lewis.
Jeans and James Lewis were good buddies. So, they slept over at each other's houses. When you seen one, you seen the other.
We learned that Phil would carry the gun, then he would loan the gun to his friend James. He said that they kind of passed it back and forth. So now we need to find out more about James Lewis.
My mom, my sisters, none of us knew who James Lewis was. We'd never heard the name before. So it was like, okay, is this gonna be our guy?
Police interest in both Jeans and Lewis has now become public knowledge.
There was a lot of whispering behind the scenes.
Everybody had a story, and then these stories got repeated, and then they got repeated as fact.
When we're dealing with small-town murders, people love to talk. You have to listen carefully. You have to find a way to use their information.
It got back to me that James Lewis had made a comment to his girlfriend that he would kill her just like he did Teresa.
Police have two suspects in the murder of Teresa Burns, Phil Jeans and James Lewis. But they need to determine who pulled the trigger.
We have a gun we believe is the gun. The gun is being carried by two people who knew Teresa Burns.
The alleged death threat issued to his girlfriend, however, places the focus on Lewis.
James Lewis was a hard kid. He made admissions that he knew about the gun.
But he said he only fired it one time, and that was at a nearby gravel pit and just doing some plinking, and target practice. We looked at his whereabouts that day. He was starting a new job.
Investigators interview his employer to verify his shift.
James Lewis's alibi wasn't totally airtight. The days were off by a day or two. I pressured him on what he knew about the murder of Teresa Burns. Then he got upset. His lower lip quivered. He said, "Look, I didn't kill Teresa Burns, and you can't prove I did because I didn't do it." And he got up and walked out of the interview. When somebody walks out of an interview like that, it certainly keeps them on your radar. You don't have the ability to clear them out of the picture. It made it just that much more difficult.
Police are no closer to knowing whether it was Lewis or Jeans who pulled the trigger.
So we have to look at both of them equally and figure out who was carrying the gun. Was it one person or two people? Which one was holding the gun when the gun was fired and killed Teresa Burns?
With both men denying their involvement, the ballistics results on the weapon they shared finally return.
The results were inconclusive. And the examiner, he says, "I can't tell you you have the gun."
An inconclusive ballistic test means that there's not enough individual markings on the bullets or the casings for an examiner to determine if it was fired from a particular gun or not.
That was very disappointing. That was one of those low points in the investigation. Now, the gun I thought I had, I don't have anymore.
Without this critical evidence, the investigation begins to stall.
Over time, the case isn't in the public eye like it used to be. We're working behind the scenes to keep it moving forward, but at some point it comes to a slow, screeching, painful halt.
We're looking for answers. Nothing was happening, and it was just getting more and more frustrating. We got to the point where we were pretty much just losing hope.
I can't describe to you how frustrating it is to work a case like that for so long and not have the resolution for the family. We put in a ton of hours. We put in a lot of work. But more than anything, I wanted there to be justice for Teresa Burns, and that wasn't happening. I worked the case for 14 straight years before I retired. I had to leave the case behind. But I always told the guys in the homicide unit that I think the case is close to being solved. We're right there. We need that one break.
22 years after the crime, the case is assigned to Commander Tim Corbett.
Anytime you open up a cold case, you basically have to start from square one. Now we're talking 2010. This family has to go to bed every day and wake up every morning knowing that the killer is going on with his life. Sometimes the answers are already there and they just need to be refined a little bit. Other times you just have to start it from the very beginning and look at it with a fresh set of eyes.
Detective Corbett finds an adult James Lewis living life on the straight and narrow.
When you're going back 20 years on any case, the truth is easy to remember, lies aren't. When he had threatened his girlfriend that he would kill her like he did Teresa Burns, James was emphatic that he didn't mean anything by that. People make stupid comments. They say things in the heat of an argument. I think James got kind of a bad shake. There were people looking at him and blaming him for stuff. but I believe James told the truth.
Phil Jeans, meanwhile, has developed an extensive rap sheet, including convictions for theft, domestic violence, and battery.
Phil's got a big mouth. So 20 years later, you find other people in his life that he said things to. We learned the weapon was going to be sold potentially within days of the homicide, and Jeans let this person know there's a crime on this gun.
Jeans didn't stop there.
I spoke to several women who knew Phil Jeans. We learned he had a girlfriend, and he told her in very clear terms that I won't use what he was going to do to her. I'll kill you like I did Teresa. He didn't say, I'll have you killed by so-and-so who killed Teresa. It was I. It was always I. Everything starts pointing towards Jeans.
It's been 24 years since the murder of Teresa Burns. Now, cold case detectives believe they know who killed her, but need to prove it.
Phil was the one that was seen with the gun the most. Phil was the one that bragged about what had happened. Phil's the one that made threats towards everybody. It was very clear what our target was, and then it was a matter of taking his story apart. Obviously, technology has changed since 1988. Higher power microscopes, different ways of looking at things.
Police decide to retest their key piece of evidence.
In 2012, I was brought the ejector rod and the firearm, and I was given 4 bullet fragments to examine.
Detectives hope modern technology can help to seal Phil Jeans' fate.
I came to the conclusion that those 4 bullet fragments were fired from the firearm that was given to me.
It's finally enough for Mishawaka police to obtain an arrest warrant.
Tim Corbett called me up and said, hey, we're going to go arrest Phil Jeans today. You want to come along? It was pretty bittersweet to see him finally put into handcuffs. I wish it had been, many years sooner, but hey, it was a sight to behold seeing him be arrested for this. It took 20 years to get to this point. Now we have to make sure that we go all the way to the end and get to conviction and get him the time that he deserves.
Critical to their case is the timeline that lays out in detail exactly what happened in the last hours of Teresa's life.
January 11th, 1988, Teresa Burns left for school in the morning, and she needed to go home to change clothes. Teresa caught the city bus and got home about 10:30. Contacted her boyfriend, Sean. While they were talking, somebody came to the front door and rang the doorbell. It was Phil Jeans.
Once Phil was in the house, I believe he had a plan. That plan was sexual assault. Phil is a dominant type individual. There's either going to be cooperation or there's going to be violence. This was a day that Jeans had mayhem in his mind, and Teresa was a fighter. Teresa wasn't just going to knuckle under and roll on her side and just give up.
So Phil Jeans pulled the trigger and killed Teresa Burns.
After a 5-day trial, Phil Jeans is convicted of murder and given the maximum sentence, 60 years.
Phil Jeans is exactly where he deserves to be. He helped us put him where he is. Thank you, Phil.
It was a bittersweet moment because both of Teresa's parents had died, so they weren't there for it. It felt really good for me, but that doesn't hold a candle to how it was for the family. They had to wait so long for this to come around.
It took 27 years before we was finally able to put this person away for what they did. And unfortunately, there are so many other people out there that are in the same situation. They've lost a loved one, and they still don't have the answers, and they've kind of lost hope. I want people to know, do not give up hope. One of the things my mom wanted was, she didn't want my sister to be forgotten. She wanted her daughter to be remembered. And it's one of the reasons why I'm here today, is to be able to say, I'm doing everything I can, Mom, that people remember Teresa.